I took care of my parents for years, but when they refused one favor, I cut them off. Now they're desperate. I had been carrying my family for years. Not in the way a son should, out of love, out of respect, but like a beast of burden weighed down by their endless expectations. 5 years. 60 months of rent payments, utility bills, emergency cash, and grocery runs. Every single time, there was a reason. My father's back was acting up again. My mother wasn't built for the workforce. My sister Emily had dreams, and dreams couldn't flourish under the burden of a regular job. So I did it. I let them take from me, always believing they would appreciate it one day. That at some point, they would recognize the sacrifices I had made for them. But appreciation never came. Only more demands. And the day I asked for something in return, they didn't just refuse. They laughed. It was a small request. A single night. Sarah had a last-minute work trip. I had an unmissable event. We needed someone to watch our daughter just for a few hours. My mother's response was immediate, dismissive. We raised our kids already. It's not our job to take care of yours. I stood there stunned. I had given them everything, and the one time I asked for help, they didn't even hesitate. I barely remember what I said next, only that my voice was tight, my hands clenched. Her laughter echoed in my ear long after I hung up. Not cruel, not mocking, just amused. Like I had asked for something ridiculous. Something I had no right to ask for at all. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The years unraveled in front of me, every sacrifice, every long night, every bank transfer I had sent without hesitation. My father's casual shrugs when I asked when he planned to work again. My mother's constant, just a little more, sweetheart. Emily's complete, unshakable belief that the world would bend to her will, just like our parents had always let it. The vacations, the nights out, the shopping sprees, all funded by me. And they had never once seen it as help. To them it was just expected. The rage was slow, creeping, like a fire catching at the edges of dry paper. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to their house. This time I wasn't coming to give them anything. I was coming to take everything back. The drive felt longer than it ever had. Every stoplight, every turn, every stretch of road gave me more time to replay the last 5 years. All the late-night calls asking for just a little help. The way my mother spoke about my money was like it was ours. The fact that my father, a grown man, had decided that his body wasn't meant for hard labor, so he stopped looking for work entirely. Emily's endless excuses, her passion projects, her creative pursuits, her insistence that she just wasn't meant for a 9-to-5 grind. Yet, they never seemed to struggle. Not really. There was always money for takeout. Always cash for new furniture, vacations, luxuries. And I had let it happen. I had convinced myself that because they were my family, this was my duty. I was the responsible one, the one who had worked for everything, so naturally I had to take care of them. But now I saw the truth. It had never been about need. It had always been about convenience. And the moment I stopped being convenient, they had tossed me aside without a second thought. I pulled into the driveway, hands clenched around the steering wheel. Their house, the house I had kept them in, looked as it always had. Warm, well-lit, comfortable. Because I had made it that way. I stepped out of the car, walked up the front steps, and pushed the door open without knocking. They had never asked for permission to take from me. I wasn't going to ask for permission to demand it back. They were exactly where I expected them to be. Sitting in the living room, drinks in hand, the TV blaring some reality show. Emily was sprawled across an armchair, scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to contribute to the conversation. My mother looked up first, surprised. "Alex? What are you doing here?" I shut the door behind me. "We need to talk." My father sighed like I had just ruined his evening. "If this is about the babysitting thing." "It is." I kept my voice steady, calm, but the anger was boiling just beneath the surface. My mother sat up straighter, lips pursed. "Oh, sweetheart, are you still upset about that? It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. 5 years of carrying them. 5 years of making sure they never struggled. And the one time I asked for something in return, it wasn't even a consideration." I crossed my arms. "I want to ask you something." She waved a hand, exasperated. "Go on, then." I looked her dead in the eye. "When was the last time you thanked me?" She blinked. "What?" I repeated it. "When was the last time you said thank you for anything I've done for you?" Silence. My father shifted uncomfortably. Emily scoffed under her breath. "And my mother?" She had no answer. Because there wasn't one. I took a slow breath. 5 years. That's how long I've been paying for this house. For your bills. Your groceries. Emily's useless hobbies. 5 years of working while you sit here doing nothing. And not once have any of you acknowledged it. My father frowned. "That's not fair." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "Not fair." I repeated. "Tell me, Dad, what part of it isn't fair? The fact that I've been supporting 3 adults who refuse to lift a damn finger? The fact that I've given you more money than I'll ever see in return. My mother let out a sigh, shaking her head. Oh, Alex. We're family. That's what family does. That word. The same word she had refused to acknowledge when I needed them. At that moment I realized something. They weren't my family. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. I was just their wallet. Their personal bank account. And I had let them treat me like one for far too long. I stood there waiting for them to say something. Anything. An apology. A hint of remorse. A moment of acknowledgement that they had taken advantage of me for years. But none of that came. Just more excuses. More entitlement. My father leaned forward, rubbing his temples like I was giving him a headache. Alex, let's not make this a bigger deal than it is. You've been helping us out because you're successful and we needed it. That's what family does. I clenched my jaw. Funny. Because when I needed help, you didn't even consider it. You laughed. My mother's face twisted into something close to annoyance. Alex, be reasonable. You're making a scene over one little thing. One little thing. That's what she called 5 years of sacrifice. One little thing. That's how little it meant to her. Emily, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. You're acting like they forced you to do it, she muttered, rolling her eyes. You wanted to help. I turned to her, my voice ice cold. No, Emily. I wanted to believe my family cared about me as much as I cared about them. Turns out I was wrong. She scoffed. Oh, please. You make more money than you know what to do with. What's the big deal? The big deal, I said, stepping closer, is that you've never worked for anything in your life. The big deal is that I have scraped and sacrificed and earned everything I have while you've sat here living off me acting like it's your birthright. She didn't answer. Because what could she say? It was true. Every word of it. My father let out a heavy sigh. Look, Alex. We appreciate what you've done for us, all right? But you don't have a wife and kid to take care of, so it's not like you. I let out a sharp laugh, cutting him off. Oh, that's rich. That's rich. I don't have responsibilities. I don't have my own family to take care of. His face paled slightly. Because he had forgotten. Or worse, he had never even considered it. To them, my life, my priorities, my family, they were secondary. Because in their minds, I wasn't my person. I was their provider. And I was finally done. I want you to listen carefully, I said, my voice low, steady. Because I'm only going to say this once. I looked each of them in the eye. This is the last time. The last time I paid your bills. The last time I covered your rent. The last time I sacrificed a single thing for people who wouldn't even spare me a second of their time when I needed them. My mother's eyes widened. You don't mean that. I held her gaze. I do. Emily snorted. You're bluffing. I smiled. We'll see. And then, before any of them could try to stop me, before my mother could launch into another guilt trip, before my father could mutter another half-hearted excuse, before Emily could roll her eyes one more time, I turned around. And I walked out. I didn't stop walking. Not when my mother called my name, her voice laced with faux concern. Not when my father muttered something under his breath, his tone exasperated, like I was being unreasonable. Not when Emily scoffed, laughing under her breath, still convinced this was a joke. I reached my car, got in, and drove away. And I didn't look back. Because there was nothing left for me in that house. Nothing but expectations and entitlement. Nothing but a family that had never seen me as more than their personal safety net. Nothing but people who had taken and taken without ever considering what it cost me. But they were about to learn. Because I had meant every word. They were on their own now. The first few days were silent. No calls. No messages. Nothing. It was almost laughable. They had spent years treating me like an extension of their bank account, and now, when that bank account was closed, they had no idea how to react. Part of me had expected it. They were waiting. Waiting for me to cool off. To come crawling back, apologizing, and offering to make things right. They thought I would crack. They didn't realize it. I had never been clearer. I wasn't going back. I wasn't giving in. Not this time. Not ever again. Then, a few days later, the messages started. Not from them. From extended family. My uncle was first. Uncle Jeff, hey, I heard you fought with your parents. They're struggling. Maybe you should reconsider. Then, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousin Melissa, cutting off your own family? Wow. That's harsh. And finally, the one that made me laugh. Aunt Linda, Emily is having such a hard time with all of this. It's not fair to put all the stress on her. Emily. The stress was on Emily? The same Emily who had done nothing while I had paid for everything? I almost responded. Almost. But what was the point? They didn't care about the truth. They didn't care about what I had done for 5 years straight. They just cared that I wasn't doing it anymore. I tossed my phone onto the couch, exhaling slowly. I had half expected this. They wouldn't let me go without a fight. Because without me, they had nothing. And it was only a matter of time before they realized it. A week passed. Then 2. And for the first time in years, I didn't send them a single cent. No rent payments. No utility bills. No bailing them out of whatever mess they had created this time. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would figure it out. That my father would swallow his pride and finally get a job. That my mother would accept that working wasn't beneath her. That Emily would be forced to face reality. But I should have known better. They weren't going to fix their situation. They were going to blame me for it. A voicemail from my mother came in late one night. I stared at my phone for a long moment before pressing play. Her voice was tight, irritated. "Alex, are you seriously ignoring us?" I didn't answer. "Your father is stressed out. We're behind on bills. We don't know what to do." Still, I said nothing. Then came the part one was waiting for. "Emily doesn't know how to handle all this." I let out a quiet laugh. Emily? Handling things? She had never handled a single responsibility in her life. And now that I wasn't cleaning up her messes, she didn't know what to do. Not my problem. Not anymore. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Then another text came through. From Emily this time. "Emily, you win." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had done. Just those two words, like this was some kind of competition. Like I had somehow wronged them. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I blocked her number. She had won for years. Yeah? I was done playing. Then, a few days later, Ryan called. Ryan had always kept up with town gossip even after moving away. So when he called out of nowhere, I knew something was up. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "Try me. Your parents are moving out." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah, man. Word is, they can't afford the house anymore. Missed too many payments." Banks breathing down their necks. A slow exhale left my lips. I shouldn't have felt anything. Not sadness. Not guilt. But still, I couldn't believe it had come to this. For years I had kept them afloat. And the second I stopped, they sank. Ryan hesitated. "You good?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah." "You sure?" "'Cause, Emily's telling people this is your fault." Of course, she was. Because Emily would rather burn the world down than admit she had never learned how to stand on her own. I chuckled. "Let her talk." "Damn," Ryan muttered. "You don't care anymore, do you?" I smiled. "No, Ryan. I don't." I drove past their house one last time. Not because I wanted to check in. Not because I felt guilty. Just to see it for myself. To remind myself that this was real. That for the first time in years, their struggles weren't my problem. The windows were dark. The front lawn was overgrown, patches of grass dried out, weeds creeping through the cracks in the driveway. For the first time since I had been keeping them afloat, the house looked abandoned. Empty. It was never my home. Not really. But for so long it had been my burden. And now? It was finally off my shoulders. The silence stretched for weeks. No more calls. No more messages. They weren't just cut off financially. They were cut off completely. And I had never felt lighter. Then, one evening, as I was finishing up some work, I got an email. Not from Emily. Not from my mother. From my father. I hesitated before opening it. But curiosity won. Subject: "Let's fix this." The message was short. "Alex, your mother isn't well. She misses you. We both do. If there's any way to fix this, let's talk." I stared at the words, waiting for something else. An apology. An admission of guilt. Something to show they had finally understood why I left. But there was nothing. Just another attempt to pull me back in. Just another way to manipulate me into saving them. I knew how this worked. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't reaching out because they had changed. They were reaching out because they needed something. Because without me, they had nothing. I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could reply. Tell him exactly what I thought. Tell him that I had finally figured them out. That I knew they didn't miss me. They missed what I could do for them. But that wasn't necessary. Because I had already given them my answer. The day I walked out of their house. The day I cut them off. The day I decided to choose myself over them. I deleted the email without responding. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because I had nothing left to say. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Throwing that email away should have felt like an ending. But it wasn't. Because this wasn't just about cutting them off. It was about starting over. For years, I had been so focused on keeping them afloat that I never stopped to think about what I wanted. What my life could be like without them draining me. Now, I finally had the chance to find out. And for the first time, that excited me. Months passed. Then, a year. No more guilt trips. No more late-night phone calls. No more stress over their problems. I built a life that was truly mine. A life where my money stayed in my bank account. Where my time was spent with people who valued me. Where I didn't have to constantly prove my worth to people who never saw it. And you know what? I was happier than I had ever been. One day, I ran into an old family friend. They hesitated before saying, "So, I heard about your parents. Tough situation, huh?" I just smiled. Not for me. They blinked, clearly expecting me to feel bad, to show some remorse. But I didn't. Because of their downfall? It wasn't my responsibility. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.